Hi, everyone. Um, let's start the session in a moment with some slides. Hopefully, we'll mostly be discussing, but just for people who haven't been in previous discussions on similar subjects. Yep, I'm Moray Allan, and the session is Jonathan actually put in the schedule, so hopefully he will at least be jumping up, and a lot of other people are on the stream. If you haven't got on the stream yet and you want on the Jitsi call and you really want to dive in, then it's kind of your last chance to contact someone and try and join. There's still time. But yeah, I'll try to run through these slides quite quickly. So just find my fingers. Oops. Yeah, so first point, we're talking here about having a lot of things, including offline events. And I realize that some people may think that's just crazy at the moment, that there's a pandemic on and it's really not a good idea to have such things. But I think one thing to say about that is we can at least be planning things for the future and discussing what we should be doing. But also another aspect is actually in some ways a pandemic makes it more important to have more local Debian events in the future, because if it's all harder for us all to travel around the world than it used to be, then it's actually more important than before to have local interactions where we can easily meet up with people more in our own regions. So we've had a few sessions at previous DebConfs about local groups and similar things. And well, sorry that sometimes not much has come out of that, but I think we've had at least useful discussions for the participants. Again, in this session, hopefully we can be moving forwards rather than just repeating discussions we've already had. But just to say why we think these things are important, I think one thing is that Debian generally can seem quite scary to people who are not yet involved in it. To people who've just Debian users out there, a lot of them think that there's some really elite group of strange people who produce Debian, and that it's this very unwelcoming community maybe, or if they heard something from some forum, or just that they're not clever enough or great enough somehow to do Debian things. And I think one of the positive things that there's a big like a reason that it's really worth doing for Debian of local groups is that it's a way people can come into Debian much more easily. If they already have a connection, then it's much easier to start helping, like working on an area of Debian where you already know someone doing something, or just to ask a friend that you've already met, how do you do things? We say just start working a lot of the time, but it's not that easy to just start working if you don't have any connection yet. So we have a lot of local groups at the moment. If you read the wiki page, which we have on them, this is a slightly out-of-date map of local groups around the world. Some of these actually are not very active at the moment, and there's also a few that haven't been added onto this version of the map, but it does show you that there's a lot of things out there, and we've got a reasonable geographic spread. Obviously, there's rather a gap in this map in Africa, for example, and not very much in Asia compared to population, but that's unfortunately that echoes a bit where we have contributors at the moment who are very active. But the other thing is there's actually a lot of other small Debian communities in local places who are just invisible because they don't think that their activity is important enough to put onto places like this wiki page, where for a few Debian contributors might be meeting up, and just at the moment they only do that between themselves, and it's not visible to other people. Again, this map is just produced from information in a wiki. In fact, all we have is a simple list on a page. So one thing to think about here as well is what other distributions do, or other free software projects. So this is the Debian Local Groups wiki page. That when you come to it, I won't scroll through it all just now, but there's a long list of groups below this. As a comparison, this is a Ubuntu portal for their kind of parallel structure. And it's just a bit more friendly when you come in. There's more of some more information and things like maps and images, and not just a plain wiki page, but also there's a lot more structure there to support local groups. There's a difference. In Debian at the moment, we just really tell people, well, get on with it, form a group. But maybe there's more we should be doing than that. Again, Fedora, they have a website with some information. So Fedora also have different structures where they ask people individually to sign up to be things, different terminology that I don't know if someone else on the call will be able to explain to us what it all means, but they have terms like being a promoter or an advocate or an ambassador. I also noticed, though, that Fedora actually themselves think that their current scheme has not been working that well, and it's all under review to be reorganized. So maybe it's also interesting for us to watch what happens during their reorganization and to try and learn from their new ideas. Again, I'll try. There's lots of other projects out there that have similar structures, and if people want to come into the discussion and talk about them, that'd be very interesting. In Debian, again, another thing that is quite inconsistent between the current groups because there's no structure. I mean, we have a lot of groups with different names. There's some of them which are called Debian City or Debian Country as a common thing. There's other ones which call themselves a Debian user group. That's already raising an interesting question because some of these groups have been very much targeted just at people who are already contributing to Debian, but we might want to include more people than that. And then, but equally, you don't want to make people feel it's only a users thing. So there's kind of questions about that. Debian interest groups, another one that might describe as these kind of groups more accurately sometimes, but also sounds slightly technical. And then actually a lot of the groups have, if you read the wiki, lots of them have different localized amusing joke names, which are funny to people in their region and hopefully other ones as well. I'm not really trying to say that we should, I'm not trying to advocate that we should set a specific name that groups must have, but I think how we name these things when we talk about them in the generality and how we label them on a website and so on does set some kind of expectations of whether people think it's worth having these groups or whether people think that it's interesting to them. And again, one thing to bear in mind in not just for naming, but for what these groups should be doing and how we should be managing them is that if we really were successful in forming them, then there might end up being lots of them which have people who are basically what we currently would class as users doing them. They obviously, we can argue semantics that as soon as they organize a group, they become someone who's contributing to the Debian, but they're not someone who had been necessarily contributing in a standard way before. So I think these are not necessarily going to be teams within Debian, but at the same time, you can think of them as kind of team Debian in a wider sense, that they certainly want the same aims as other people in Debian, and they're trying to push forward the same goals that some people do by doing other contributions to Debian. So supposing that we had to decide what should be listed or not, at the moment it's just a wiki page and people basically add themselves and we might just remove them if it was clearly inappropriate. But there are some kind of questions that again open there of, are we only trying to list groups that are really Debian specific, for example? If we allow it to be wider than that, do we want to make it that they have to be free software only, for example? Are we saying that groups should be having regular meetings to be counted as an active group? Or is it enough, for example, to just be a group of people who are in a location and ready to meet up when someone happens to be interested? I think sometimes there's an issue on this that people, again, as I say, mentioned, some people have been scared even to list their own groups because they feel that it's not a serious enough group compared to some of the other associations that are much more formal and listed on the page. Personally, I think we shouldn't worry too much in these ways. And I think it's useful to have things listed, even if it's just someone who really wants to, is happy to do more social Debian things in their city, for example. And I don't think people should be embarrassed if it's only a couple of people who meet up from time to time. And I don't think people should be embarrassed or worried if a group happens for a while and then stops happening. I mean, this is quite different from creating a package or many other structures within Debian, that actually if the thing only happens for a short time and disappears, then that's still being useful. So some of the questions that I've just been asking kind of presuppose that visibility of these groups. I think at the moment there is a wiki page. It's not that visible to people who don't know to look for it. And it would also be nice, ideally, if we could have a prettier website. So, I mean, I don't know if anyone who's on this session today feels inspired to and has the knowledge to go out there and design and build a nicer website. I mean, I know that there's lots of tools we could use to do this. It would be, if we had a team of a group of people willing to do the work, it would be great if we had not only lists of groups that exist, but also some kind of central list of meetings or events that are happening, which, of course, at the moment might also include online events of different types. Again, if we had more of these local events listed, it also just gives more of an impression that things are happening, even if it's historical events as well as future ones. It would be nice just to have this in a more explorable way. And it's more discoverable and makes people feel much more that there's a kind of social thing around Debian that they can get involved in easily. So, I mean, there's other things that we could be doing. Again, I'm hoping people can join in the discussion and say what they think would be most useful. So most obviously, we could encourage more actively than we have been people to form these groups, which well, maybe people, again, who attend these kind of events will be inspired themselves to try something in the area where they live. But again, we could be encouraging people more actively who are not already involved actively in Debian. We could be, for example, one thing that some people are hoping will kind of come out of these discussions at the moment would be a team of people who are ready to support these local groups more as well and to help them in different ways. Again, if we had more of not only having a website, but also if we could have other types of social sharing of events information that we could feed local events into more, that they go out onto different types of social media where they'll get extra visibility. And then another item that, again, is probably a good idea, but is a big open question at the moment, is how can we spend all this money that we've been hearing Debian has to spare on helping these kind of activities to happen more? So if we're going to spend Debian money, obviously it's not just sending money to people. We have to decide what we're trying to do with it. So one suggestion is sending swag to these kind of groups. So we could be sending stickers, we could be sending t-shirts, we could be sending other objects people want to think of. Obviously, there's lots of practical questions around that, and again, it would need volunteers and people to drive it. But certainly other organizations who are in some ways Debian's competitors are already doing these things. Another thing that other organizations and companies have been doing is, for example, fund pizza, at least occasionally, for these kind of groups, or the local equivalent. That seems to work, especially, for example, to encourage student groups to form. If you tell them you're going to give them a free pizza for having a meeting and starting a group, then they may be excited by that. And of course, there's other expenses we could potentially be funding of, whether that's travel expenses of certain times or paying for people to book rooms for events, so on. Again, there's practical questions about how you would administer it and make it work properly, but it's something that's interesting to consider at least. So that's all the slides I'm going to do. I hope that's at least raised a few questions. So I will try not. So I think that's enough stuff from me. Let's come over to some other people. So I don't know if maybe it would be interesting to start if a couple of volunteers could just say their own experiences of Debian groups that they've been involved in or have tried to start, or what they've seen around it in their own experience before we kind of jump into discussing any specific issues. I don't know who's willing to go first.
Christoph, just unmute yourself first.
Yeah, I'm not sure how these procedures here work. So for me, I tried to set up a local group here in my hometown. This is Karlsruhe in Southwest Germany. And I have to say it failed. Cannot really tell why, but bottom line was didn't never think. At most we were 5 people, but the last 2 times I sit there alone all day. And it's quite a shame since we have, I think, 5 DDs in town. And I contacted them, but somehow it didn't work out. So I'm a little despaired in this subject, and I have little to none enthusiasm to give this another try. Certainly I would need someone who would in a way support me and give me more ideas how to make this event even known. This is certainly something that could have been done in a better way. Also, in addition to the question, what does a local group look like? We had some discussions. What kind of event do we want to have happen? Mm-hmm. It might be some kind of Debian promotion event, so a bit like a booth at some Linux Day, so people can come along with little to none Debian experience, ask questions. And the kind of event that I would actually like to have is a bit more, might sound elite, but a bit like a DebConf or something like that. So just, we are a few Debian nights in town, let's meet, let's hack together on our projects, because from my experience, hacking works so much better, working on the packages works so much better when I'm not alone in my room, but some other folks are around I can talk to. So this is perhaps another aspect of how a local group can or might work. Mm-hmm. So far from me.
It's very interesting.
Anyone else wants to speak before I jump in? Doesn't look like it. So
there's a hand up.
Oh, okay. Go ahead, Paulo.
Hi, everybody. Here in Brazil, we have some experience some years ago, because I was not a Debian member in that time, but they found many state Debian user groups by states. So we have a lot of groups, but today basically they didn't exist anymore. And today here in Brazil, we have Debian Brazil as a national group, we can say that. And some cities have some local groups, but on the cities, just small groups. Like here in Curitiba, we have a group here, another in Brasilia City, and São Paulo too. So I think it's a good idea to have just Debian user groups or small groups by city, not by states like we had here many years ago. And the Brazilian group, the Debian Brazil group, Debian Brazil community, we work as a group for go to the events, free software events, big software events here in Brazil, and to organize booths there and sell some merchandise products as t-shirts and mugs and stickers. So basically, this is our experience here in Brazil.
Thanks. Is Luna maybe was next in line, I think?
Who's talking?
I only hear static noise.
Yeah.
And Jonathan, you are on mute.
I was just going to say maybe Luna should add that to RSC or the pad instead.
So
Shruti
Jonathan, maybe it's after that then.
Yes. I would like just to suggest to start reading some questions and comments because these are very useful for our buff.
Before we go to questions and answers, one thing that I wanted to do with this session, because there's kind of a sense of urgency that I feel to get things moving and started in terms of doing actual solid stuff, because we can easily have a few sessions where we just talk in the general and abstract of, how are we going to organize local teams and what are local teams like. But I just want to get things going, find some action items and things that we can do in the short term. And usually I like thinking in the long term, but at the moment I feel like for local teams we need to be a bit punchy and think, what can we do next week? What can we do by the end of September? This is important for me now, especially because we're in this COVID situation where we can't actually physically meet up. If we can start mobilizing and planning and be ready for when we actually can get together, even if it's just in small local groups, then that would be fantastic. And I think starting to work on things like T-shirt kits and sticker kits and pamphlets and posters and doing large-scale collective organization and planning and coordination. I think that's what should be our focus right now. And then maybe some of these things we could circle back on a bit later on, or keep in mind, or do on weekly meetings. But with that in mind, maybe we should do at least one or two Q&A to let that settle in before we continue.
Sure.
Justin, did you find one or two questions that are good? I haven't been able to read them yet.
Okay, let's start. For instance, this is a comment from Pollo. One of the recurring problems I have been having while organizing local Debian meetings in Montreal is finding a suitable space to meet. We often rely on partners and friends, but having a budget to rent low-cost venues or give back a little to the volunteer groups who host us and pay rent will be nice.
Can I take this one? Yep. So one of the ideas is that we collectively, maybe the people in this channel, or even a larger group of people who are interested, that together some form of a committee or a delegation is even formed that works almost like the DebConf team does. How the DebConf team works is when a DebConf event is being planned, they come up with a budget and say we're going to spend this much on this and on this, that, and they submit it to the DPL. And after that, they're responsible for every line item that goes in there. So I think it might be great if we have a local team group that does a similar function that says this is what we spend on venues for this year, this is what we spend on travel and stickers and T-shirts and all the different items. And then they're responsible for that, whatever they want to do, as long as it fits in those budgets. They can, of course, make changes as well. Then that's good. And I think that fits in with Paulo's question. If a local group wants to say, hey, we want to spend $1,000 or $100 or whatever it is for this venue for the day, then that local team group can actually look at the request and handle that. I think my question time is up because Justin wants to speak.
I think Shruti was waiting to speak for a while.
Yeah, I wanted to add to the local team experience. We in India, we have a lot of events organized. We have a local blend of DebConf, mini DebConf. We have it like DebBootstrap, where one track is dedicated to Debian and we have another track for free software, so that we attract all kinds of people who come for free software. They can come to get interested in Debian and go on. And like Moray mentioned in his slides, the local group is really important, because the amount, we have 4 or 5 DDs in the last couple of years who came to Debian is through personal connections or these groups. It's not through like these local groups helped a lot to get these people, and this DebConf in India is a good opportunity to have more people to get involved. And this Malayalam track, which happened, helped a lot to mobilize the team in Debian. And I'm happy to say that we received like enough support from Debian. We got budgets and stuff from Debian. So yeah, that's my experience.
So, thinking about in what has Mary has shared with us about the challenges to attract people to the local groups, and for instance, to having a nicer website or some resources that could be useful to achieve this. I think this was a kind of inspiration to present my talk about the Debian Academy project, because I find that with this option, we could even talk about how can someone get introduced in a local group, or during times of COVID-19, it could be something useful to have knowledge through this e-learning platform. So, well, I just want to add this related to some points of Mary.
So I think Laura is trying to speak.
Yes, I wanted to share two things. One is to say that many years ago we had a section in the Debian website called events, where you could find events going on in different places and so on. But since the maintenance of that section was a bit hard, and it seems that people find some difficulty to become the website contributor and to edit themselves the info. At some time, people decided to move the information to the wiki, to the Debian wiki. And I find interesting, I would like that we have a nice website or whatever platform where people can find the information. But it's the most important thing is to keep the information up to date. And this requires quite a lot of work. So in my opinion, I think the wiki is okay. Because I would prefer people to put time on strengthen the real groups, or making maybe other things like facilitating printing swag or merchandising or whatever, instead of creating a nice website that is very nice this year, but in 2 years maybe we don't have enough workforce to maintain the content, you know. This is with my website hat. And on the other side, I wanted to share my experience in Spain, in Madrid. We don't have a local group, and we are some DDs living in Madrid, but we live very far away, and it's very difficult for us to create something. The things that we do, or the things that I try to do, is when somebody from Debian comes to Madrid for a conference or whatever, or work or tourism or whatever, we try to make a meeting to just drink something together or talk or whatever. And even that thing that is only 2 hours or things like that, it's usually difficult for people to come and meet, and because I'm not sure why, because of the transportation, the different timetables, people already are I mean, we have a family and long work time and things like that. And the other thing that I do is that in my workplace and family and people I know, I share stickers, and it's something that I find that people like. I'm not sure why, or maybe because I always give it to them with a smile or things like that. But for example, I could print my Debian stickers, but in 10 years that I'm contributing to Debian, I couldn't find the time, the printer workshop or whatever to print myself the stickers. So if any friend goes to any conference or whatever, I say, please bring me stickers so I can give to other people. What does it mean? That I really think that if there is a local group supporting this kind of things, can be useful to create Debian attraction in places where it is difficult.
Elena, I think you're next.
Okay, thanks. I'm in Italy, and we have a small group. Basically, we are members of the local Linux user group who are interested in Debian. There is me and ADM, and then the other people are mostly users. Since the local user group meets weekly, formally we have a weekly meeting, but it's not always about Debian. And then what we are trying to do is to try and meet other people for special events. We organize a dinner for Debian Day and the release party mostly, and we've managed to attract maybe 5 or 6 other users for this kind of things, which is, I think, it's a good result. And the other thing that we do is we organize the Snow Camp, which is a small DebCamp, a space to make sprints for about 15 people or so every year. This one is for Debian old-time Debian contributors. But when we organize that event, we always have one dinner when we invite the local community to try and get the other people from the Linux user group to get more involved and know more people inside the Debian, with some results. And then I have also been involved a few years ago with one event that was organized in various places around Italy. And this one was organized mostly by the Ubuntu local group, I don't remember the name, which is Italian in scope. We organized a small conference in Italian. That was also a nice thing to do. It would be nice probably to do it again. One thing that happened during those events was that Ubuntu provided a few stickers and that support was helpful. So with other people in Italy, other DDs, we have been talking about it would be a nice idea to start and maybe print some stickers and also other small swag and being available to distribute it around Italy. I think that from a logistical point of view, doing it in Italy or in Europe, it's probably not a big difference. But I think that it's something that it could be nice to have when organizing tiny events, because if we expect maybe 15 people, 10 of which we meet every week, we're not going to print stickers. not really worth, but being able to do so with a wider group is probably useful.
Yeah, I think especially if you're a very small local group, like there's been this question of what happens when you're just 1 or 2 people. I think being a small user group is completely fine. If you're just 1 or 2 people, or 1 person is kind of pointless. But if you're 2 people having coffee every Tuesday morning and that's your local group, maybe that's just how it is, and there's no shame or problem with that. And myself and Moray talked about this earlier. Even a short-lived local group is also fine. Maybe a local group exists for a few months, and for whatever reason, maybe it's on a small island where people are only in the summer. I don't know, there can probably be 100 reasons, but maybe it's fine if a user group is also short-lived. I don't see necessarily a problem with that. And also, like Elena just said, you know, when you're a small group, doing things like stickers and T-shirts are almost impossible. You kind of need a larger group that pulls resources together and do it on some scale. Like, I was quite impressed with the DebConf T-shirts. When they talked about this a month ago, I thought they're not going to get T-shirts in time to people during COVID-19, where either half of the post offices are on strike or are just plain closed. And yet, here we are with most of us having T-shirts. And
I would actually like to hear the explanation of that. If Nati can summarize, maybe
Nati can share some about that.
Basically, freeware are amazing, and also the rest of the T-shirt team is really amazing, because this was actually done. Partly it was localized efforts, so we had somebody taking care of T-shirts in India, Shruti. We have Lenyaro dealing with. It started out as just Brazil, and then I sort of realized, yeah, possibly all of Latin America. That would be a good idea. We've got Benel dealing with the T-shirts for. It ended up being all of Africa, because, well, I think there were only at the time sort of 4 or 5 people who registered from outside. No, maybe 6 from outside South Africa. So it seemed best to sort of. And Tafrir dealt with the T-shirts for Israel, and like I said, the people at Freeware are really, really good and have been so diligent about the shipping and just dealing with this completely unusual situation on quite a short time scale. So, yay.
So in a kind of one-word answer, do you think it's plausible that we could do swag in similar ways around the world? Or is it?
Possibly, yeah. I don't see why not.
Oh, pardon. Antonio is the next.
Yep.
Yeah, okay. I wanted to raise a few points. One, where we are talking about listing the groups and having accurate information from the Debian side, we might want to look into doing something similar to what we do with the derivatives. So doing a census from time to time, 1 year, 2 years. I don't know the right period. I agree with Laura that the wiki should be good enough. If we put a nice picture in the beginning, like Ubuntu has with the continents in different colors, that should be good enough already. And another point I want to raise is to not underestimate the potential of having an online presence for those groups, because that's what creates the feeling of being part of the group, right? So if you are always talking online like we do in Debian, then at some point we want to meet in person. And then if you do it locally, it becomes easier. Also, there are some corner cases in some parts of the world where you have a common language, but really huge distances. So for instance, for Spanish-speaking people, we have most of America speaks Spanish, but it's really far away. So even having that, it's not really a local group, but it's another way in which we can reach new people who are not participating in Debian yet. And yeah, I have some other stuff written down here, but I adjourn for now.
Shall we take one more question, Jatan? Oh, Paulo is next. Sorry.
Hey, I remember now that some weeks ago we started to do something every Thursday. We are producing a streaming by using YouTube, so it's not a free software solution. But we every Thursday we make a streaming by YouTube to talk about Debian. We can have some talks or just talk. Uh, for example, last week we talked with some contributors that they are not Debian developers, and we talk about how they contribute to Debian. Another occasion we talked with some Debian developers to talk about their experience and why they are Debian developers. So I think it's a suggestion to use some tool. Sure, it's better if you can use some free software tool, but in the worst occasion, you can use YouTube and the streaming talks every week or every month or something like that for your local community or for your country. This is my suggestion for the others. The channel is called Debian Brazil on YouTube.
So we have 2 minutes left, which is quite scary. But my why is word so hard? My goal for this meeting was that local teams in this meeting doesn't get discussed and then dies again at DebConf, because that's happened 1 or 2 times before that. Nothing happens in between in terms of a big plan. So what we're going to do is we're going to send out a poll and set up another meeting so that we can discuss it as soon as, a week and a half or 2 weeks from now. I'll add all the people who's in this call to that poll. But if you're interested in joining this initiative and also want to help make local groups better all over the world, please go to the pad and add your name at the end. I've added a small section, some way that we can contact you, either email or RSC or your Debian account name, and I'll add you to that poll. And then we'll discuss this further again and hopefully come up with some great ideas.
Yep, and thank you to everyone participating today. I know there's more questions in the Etherpad that we haven't covered, certainly, but we should certainly carry on discussing these topics. So there's plenty of time in the future to carry on with them all.
Yep. Can we squeeze in one more question, Jata?
Yeah. Can we have an online local group? Maybe useful for that one to be part of a local group, but it is difficult for them to reach out.
I like the idea, almost like we had an online DebConf. So sure, someone just needs to do it.
Yeah. And I think also if we have individual local groups with in-person events, especially at the moment, they should be doing things online. There's nothing to stop a local group from having a talk for their own people, but again, ideally at the moment we could try and help them to stream it to a wider audience also. Actually this connects back to Jonathan's stuff about Debian Academy and so on. I think that sometimes some of these local groups might be able to make great materials for users and contributors more easily than Debian centrally.
Cool.
Yeah.
Anyone else have a burning thought before we adjourn?
Yeah, I something I remember when Paulo talked is that if we want to reach new people, unfortunately, we are going to have to go out of our comfort zone of IRC and mailing lists. So, and that means Telegram, YouTube, and all that shit.
We are trying to do in-person promotion of the free software alternatives, the federation and everything else.
Yeah, let's use peer-to Debian Social and our free social networks.
I'm not sure where our talk post is, but we are over time. So I guess on that note, thanks everyone for joining, and we'll get together and chat in a video call or RSC very soon.
And there is actually already, for people who are in RSC, there is a Debian Local Groups channel that has existed for a long time without much activity. So if anyone wants to be discussing immediately, I guess they can jump in there.
Cool. Okay.
Bye. A pointer to Debian Till.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.